Welcome to Michigan Reimagined, a Spotlight podcast. And here's your host, Chris Buck.
All right, well, we've been talking about it for almost, a little over 2 years, but the pandemic certainly has changed the world in virtually every way. One group that certainly has been caught in the fallout that I personally haven't highlighted are the nonprofits in our community. So I've got a panel today I'm really excited to have where we can hear about how the not-for-profit organizations have navigated their way through these troubling times. And we've got the Vice President of Fund Development of the Davies Project. We've got Rich Howard. We've got from Child and Families Charites, we've got Demphna. And then from the Boys and Girls Club of Lansing, we've got Carmen. And from the American Red Cross, we've got Nada. Did I do all right?
Perfect.
All right. Not going to stab at all the last names. I know it's going to be a long show when we've got five people talking, and I'll try to do the least amount of talking we can do. So I would like to try to do a quick around the room to talk just a little bit about what the mission is of your organization. So I'm going to go from left to right for those of you listening only on a podcast and can't see any of that. Rich, talk a little bit about the Davies Project.
Sure. The Davies Project provides free transportation to families with sick children to get them to their medical appointments. Most of our families are on Medicaid, and therefore transportation is a huge barrier. So we work with families with seriously ill children. We work with parents getting them to the NICU, so the neonatal intensive care unit, so that they can bond with their infant. And we also work with expectant mothers, getting them to prenatal. All about healthy children at the Davies Project.
And I know a little bit about that. So your drivers are volunteers.
They are.
And you're funded by donations and grants and the things of that nature.
501c3. You got it.
Exactly. All right. Nada, a little bit of a different organization.
Oh, yeah.
Talk to me a little bit about what you do over at the American Red Cross.
I'm Director of Development for the Michigan region at the American Red Cross. Our mission is to prevent and alleviate human suffering in the face of emergencies. We do that by mobilizing the power of our volunteers and generosity of our donors. We definitely do focus on 5 main areas, which are disaster relief, service to our armed forces, life-saving blood training, and international services.
Got it. Okay. And now your chapter basically is mid-Michigan or all of Michigan? How does that work?
All of Michigan. I
Okay.
cover all of Michigan. We definitely do have 6 chapters across the state. Mid-Michigan is one of them.
Got it. Okay. Perfect. Carmen, talk to me about the Boys and Girls Club of Lansing.
Well, the Boys and Girls Club of Lansing is a organization, a nonprofit, and our goal is to inspire and enable young people to make sure that we pull their full potential so that they are a service to their community and not a hindrance to their community. So we do that by volunteers and staff, because what we know is that what's important in a kid's life is individuals, making sure that they are feeding into the positiveness of kids. And it's so much more important now because of everything that's going on, that we understand how important our kids' lives are.
Got it. Okay, fantastic. Demphna, Child and Family Charities. I know it reasonably well, but maybe the world does not. Talk to us a little bit about it.
Well, Child and Family Charities has been in mid-Michigan since 1911.
Wow.
So quite a long time. We started very small, helping single moms and their children, and we have grown because our mission is to change and grow with the evolving needs of the community. Obviously, the needs of the community has evolved and changed, and so we have grown. And now we have 6 divisions and 30 programs. We provide services to locally 8,000 children, youth, and families, most of which are at risk, abused, neglected, or have specific needs that we can address. And then 7,000 throughout Michigan. So that's 15,000 totally.
Wow.
And our programs stem from foster care adoption to teen court, helping first-time offending youth to get on the right track and off the wrong. And we do that really well, by the way. We have programs for homeless youth, for young families who need help and they're homeless, and we get them into an apartment and work with them for over 18 months until they're on their own. And we also have programs that help families through respite childcare. So they basically can have free childcare at our Family Growth Center.
Wonderful. Okay. Well, thank all of you for the service that you provide. I mean, communities are made up of great nonprofits. I mean, there's certainly a lot of for-profit businesses and great individuals out there, but those who give their services to nonprofits, regardless of the mission, are doing really great work. So thank you as we kind of launch into some of the details of what the last couple of years have held for all of you. I don't know, maybe everyone can just kind of chime in a little bit, but is it fair to say that a significant portion of your budgets come from corporate or private donations, kind of cash influx, people, fundraising, kind of that kind of thing?
Yes. What I call it is a three-legged stool. So in terms of revenue, that if donations, it would be individuals that choose to donate to our cause.
Yep.
It would be corporate sponsorship, and it would be grants and foundations. So that might include government grants. That would include what I call family-friendly foundations.
Right.
Yeah.
Is that kind of the common three-legged stool?
Yes.
I agree. And I know things have modified a bit where how that three-legged stool sits.
Right.
But that's pretty much it.
Well,
and
that's kind of why we're here. Yeah.
once you invest the investors into your organization and they become friends of your organization so that their investment continues in the work that you're doing.
Right on. Okay. So if the pandemic hits, right, and there's all kinds of uncertainty out there, and whether it's businesses clearly are trying to figure out how to navigate some of the world, and then individuals are trying to circle their wagons to make sure that they're protected. Am I going to lose my job? My business isn't open. There's we all lived it, right? So I'm preaching to the choir when I say that there was a lot of challenging and hardship and uncertainty. Is it fair to say that uncertainty reduced the amount of people willing, it's like, hey, I've written a check to your organization every year for the last 20 years, but I'm going to have to pause this year because I don't know if I'm going to have that money, because there's going to be, there's so much uncertainty. Who knows whether the world's going to end or not. So I think I'm going to hold on to that, and maybe we'll talk next year. Is that happen?
I can jump in there a little bit. When the pandemic first hit, we decided that we had several donors who were pledging, so they paid either annually or monthly to our organization. We decided we would call them and ask them if they wanted to postpone their payments because we understood, and we knew we were in line to get a PPP loan. So
right, we're going to talk about
we knew we could do that.
Right.
So we did, and I did have some that needed to suspend their payments. Since then, they've all but one have resumed making their payments.
Okay.
But then I turned that around, and I had some who increased their payments and are still giving at that increased level.
Is that common? Yeah.
For us as well, definitely we do rely a lot on the corporations, individuals, and foundations. When the pandemic hit, it affected everybody. It affected the people. And one thing we know for sure is when disasters or incidents happen, those don't wait for the pandemic to end. So the need continued on rising. And another thing we all know, that the vulnerable people are the most affected in any situation of the sort. So our service delivery has actually increased a lot. We had to respond to way more home fires where there were natural disasters happening. We reached out to our donors, individuals or corporations and even foundations, and they did understand. People had to figure it out quickly and adapt. So they did understand. So I can say from my end, we had, as American Red Cross, and I'm sure all the other nonprofits, to adapt quickly and reach out with new ways to our donors to tell them and explain the needs and show them the impact of their support. So while we had to kind of, in some places, some donations were kind of a bit less, but overall, I can say we've seen increase with the generosity of our donors.
Fantastic. That's great
and
news.
I
Carmen, you chimed in. Yeah.
Agree. Because of the pandemic and because of the pivoting everyone had to do, because nonprofits, I must say, are businesses as well. A lot of times people don't look, we are a business. And so we too saw an increase. And Lansing is just a generous community. And so because of the pivot that we had to do regarding the schools, we're very, very much connected in partnership with the schools.
Got it.
And because they weren't able to go in class, the Boys and Girls Club was one of the learning labs that allowed the kids to come in, and my staff actually was pseudo teachers on with the teachers. So when some of our investors found out about that, not only did they increase, but we had new people to come on and become investors in the Boys and Girls Club. So we actually didn't miss a beat because of the generosity of this community.
Mm-hmm.
That's great.
I would have to totally agree with that. We actually increased in terms of donations. The pandemic was and is and continues to be horrible.
Yes.
Right.
But it did, I think, provide an opportunity for nonprofits, like Nada was saying, to really, and Carmen, to really step back and look at. You said the word pivot, but really to look at to do things differently, and also not take our donors for granted.
Absolutely.
I had a fundraiser scheduled for April
of 2020.
I canceled that, obviously,
Right.
and rescheduled for June because clearly
It was going to be over. Yes.
So it was really a lot of unknown, which really added to the strategy and the planning and the stress. But I think there are certain practices that will continue on forever, and one of them would be I think the live stream is something that we'll always do for a large event, because there are some folks that aren't going to be comfortable.
Right.
I think too that this pandemic has brought to the surface or highlighted the needs of individuals that weren't necessarily highlighted before.
That's true.
I mean, we know with mental health, it is so much more prevalent now, but I think also it's just more highlighted. People can actually see it now, where before it was more, oh, well, let's put that to the side.
Right.
So mental health is an issue our community now sees as a real issue, and I think our country does as well.
Great.
So, I mean, there is some money being invested in that, though, from the federal government, from the state government, and then also from foundations, because they see that is an issue where I don't think it was actually as visible before the pandemic.
Right.
Agreed.
And I think it's only going to get worse in terms of an increased need.
Right.
Absolutely.
Agreed.
Well, and with so many things going on in the world today,
It's unbelievable.
Definitely.
Absolutely.
Well, as I sit around thinking of show topics and guests to have, and it dawned on me as I don't even remember where the idea hatched from, but I said, nonprofits, it's logical to think that the donations kind of went down as everyone had to circle the wagons. And then it's also logical to think that the needs that they serve probably ramped up. So you've got this opposite force, when things aren't disrupted, you've got this amount of money to serve this amount of people, and you're kind of status quo, and things dip and peak and valley here and there, but it's kind of normal. And then all of a sudden, boom, this goes down, this goes up, and everyone's cheese gets moved. And we talk a lot about how companies and for-profit organizations have had to navigate that, but the nonprofit story I wanted to make sure got told. Now, the American Red Cross tends to be the people that run towards the fire. You go to where the action is because that's what you serve. So
Absolutely.
I would imagine the pandemic made you deploy people in a different way and at a different level.
Definitely, we had to make sure that we still show up. Actually, home fires are the top cause for death around the United States, and the American Red Cross responds every 8 minutes to a disaster. The vast majority are home fires.
Wow.
We definitely had to change the way we deliver our services. We follow guidelines. We had to train our volunteers, but we had to show up for the people. We provide shelter to help people after a home fire, for example. Now, with the pandemic, we had to think of new ways. We can't put people together. So you can imagine that with all the ways that we're kind of changing to deliver and keep our volunteers and clients safe, we also had increased cost on everything.
Right.
So this is where as well, we needed to go back to our donors and tell them this is what's happening and this is why the needs are rising. And we were lucky enough for a lot of time, volunteers kept on showing up for the Red Cross, and then donors kept on supporting us in the best way possible.
Right.
Another thing that I'd like to point to is the fact that the American Red Cross as a nation provides 40% of the nation's blood supply. With the pandemic, that was a challenge for us as well. So with people not really turning out to donate blood as they used to before, companies were people were working from home. So that was another thing for us that we kind of had to get the attention to, because even in the pandemic, people need blood.
Right.
Patients need blood. Anybody does. So
I'm using mine right now. Sorry. I never do that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good point.
Yes, that's unbelievable. And so for the rest of you, did you, I think the world did a pretty decent job of understanding that we all just need to do our best. There are no rules. I can't pull out my COVID-13 playbook and just modify that. Everyone was kind of making it up as we went along, right?
Yeah.
So did your organization serve as essential workers, or did because you're going to have volunteers and employees, and the people that you serve are going to be from A to Z on their fear of the pandemic, right? I mean, I've worked in a 40-person organization, and you had the people that's like someone sneezed 4 cubicles over, and I got to go home and quarantine for 5, weeks or whatever. And then you have other people who just say, "Give me a hug, bro." Yeah. It's, it's May of 2020, and I'm going to give you a kiss on the cheek, right? So you have to respond to all of that. Did you feel like you had the support you need or the latitude to find people who are willing to stay active and be able to go about your business, or did you have to suspend services and really call things off?
Well, here at the Boys and Girls Club, happened in March 2020. We opened back up in July of 2020. And when you say about the services and the people, a lot of our part-timers were MSU students. They went home.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And so when you talk about services for our young people and, trying to do homeschooling at the club, that's when you talk about, again, pivoting. So we collaborated with Impressions 5 and we shared staff. Because at that time, like you said, there's no playbook. What do you do in situations and circumstances where you want to provide services? People still needed food. Food bank was out there. They needed some place to actually have the food delivered. So those kind of things. We delivered different activities to our kids. So people... we developed a different type of way to get people to help us with our services. Right. That's what you do.
Okay.
And we have 3 residential programs, so you can't, just say, okay, we're going to do it differently.
That's true.
And yes, keeping the direct care workers, the youth specialists on staff was not an easy task.
Right.
It definitely wasn't. Some of them are, students going for their master's degrees, some going for their bachelor's. Wearing a mask all the time that you're working with other teens that don't want to wear masks is definitely, but I'm telling you, it was definitely a challenge, but we made it through.
Yeah.
One other thing I wanted to point out was because of the generosity of the community before the pandemic, we were able to purchase technology that we needed so that when we actually went home, we purchased that technology literally just before we all went home. And who knew, right?
Who knew?
Yeah.
And we were able to adapt to working at home for those of us who were able to work at home. Caseworkers with foster kids could do a lot of work remotely. We're still doing that. We're flexing our space.
Yeah.
And I think we've gotten into that because we like it.
It's a habit now.
Yeah. If nothing else, and you said it, Chris, there were no rules. We have nothing but flexibility. Because when there's no rules, you can try this and that, and you can do things, and again, think outside the box. And we as I think the nonprofit sector, had some flexibility we didn't have before.
And you didn't get leaned on. People weren't telling you you're doing it wrong or violating rules. I mean, it was a little bit of right. I'm just curious,
so.
right? Because clearly there was. Early on anyway, when we were forced to work, in the private sector from home, there were, like OSHA had a hotline. It's like, if you're an employee and you're being told that you need to go into work and the governor's order is that you can't, you can dial this number anonymously and basically rat out your employer who's making you do something that the law says you're not allowed to do. So I was just curious as to whether you felt kind of the big brother leaning over your shoulder saying, you're not allowed to stray that. I appreciate your creativity, but you're breaking the rule in this way.
We had to make sure that we're keeping everybody safe. Exactly. And the thing in all of us, it's not a choice that we have. We have to be there for the people when they need us.
Right.
We are there to help them. Right. So we all followed safety guidelines, CDC guidelines.
Right.
We had to shift, for example, CPR training classes. We had to give them online. That area we could kind of work on, but there were things that had to be done, for example, in person, showing up for people. Like, you still had to do it following the guidelines to make sure everybody is safe.
Right. That's true. And I think the good news is that you all start with your moral compass pointed in the right direction because of the industry that you choose to serve. Right. So I think, unlike some of the private sector people that are a little bit more slave drivers to try to get people to do things that are breaking the rules.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point in terms of there are, I don't know how many nonprofits in the state of Michigan, but a whole bunch.
Yep.
But I don't feel in competition with anybody at this table or in this community or in this state, because it's really about your mission and telling your story.
Yep.
So I think we're stronger. We're stronger together.
And always looking at how we can collaborate with
yes.
to make our missions stronger. And when you were talking about making sure that everything was safe, that's where we leaned on our board members, because they're in businesses where they had particular people there that worked that were skilled in certain areas.
Right.
So they would send over their employees to make sure that we were set up in an appropriate, safe manner for all of our kids and all of our staff. Mm-hmm. And I'm not a development person. I think I'm the only CEO up here. So what, Chris, this gave me the opportunity was to talk to my investors and my board members about how financially secure are we? Mm-hmm. Because if the PPP had not happened, were we in a situation that we were able to be viable to the people that we serve? So that made us go back and re-look at our finances to make sure that we were in a situation that we are solid. And that's what our investors wanted to make sure that we were.
Makes sense. One final topic before we need to wrap up. Mm-hmm. But definitely you brought it up, the PPP. Mm-hmm. So I was going to ask, and you talked about the three-legged stool, Rich, and the donations and the corporate and then the grants and government money and that kind of stuff. So PPP was made available to the private sector. I think the public has heard of the Paycheck Protection Program. Mm-hmm. And you fill out these forms, talk about your salary. And that was really an initiative to try to prevent an employer from laying people off. It was a loan that turned into a grant. Mm-hmm. If you can demonstrate that I had 46 employees when this whole thing started, I've got 46 or 47, or you maybe had a buffer. I'm down to 44, but that's not my fault. They quit, that kind of thing. But then it turned into a grant. So there was kind of free money to help you stay. So you already kind of answered the question that nonprofits were eligible for that as employers.
And we definitely took advantage of that, and it definitely did sustain us through some difficult times. Additional costs, obviously, for having to do our mission differently.
Yep.
Gas alone, driving groceries to families that needed them because there was no public transportation to get them to the groceries.
Right.
So
at least gas was cheap then.
Not
to timestamp this too much.
Cheap. Anyway, it absolutely did assist us. Plus, we do have some staff that are more administrative that didn't necessarily have a lot to do. We didn't have to do any layoffs.
Good.
Not a single one. We did have them do some training at home, but it wasn't like they were, having to work in the office in order to get paid.
Right. And was there other money outside of the PPP? Like there's shuttered venues. I serve on the Lansing Symphony Orchestra board, so I know that they qualified because their revenue came from ticket sales and they weren't able to sell tickets for shows in that manner. And so there was like a shuttered venue grant. But I know that, we have the whole $1.3 trillion or whatever
LEAP
was written.
came through. They had some special grants as well.
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
So it was some special COVID.
I think a lot of funders, meaning the foundations, adjusted.
They
or
did.
readjusted.
Agreed.
And chose to reallocate their dollars for nonprofits.
Agreed.
To help them through the pandemic versus
Yeah.
what maybe they would have
Yeah,
funded
because United Way
previously.
Community Foundation, yeah.
Oh,
Right.
yeah,
They
absolutely.
all talked about how
Yep.
can we shift,
Yep.
pivot
Yep.
to make sure that our nonprofits are secure.
Exactly.
Even Delta Dental, they
Yes.
they give grants
Very
to
nice.
people, to organizations that provide direct dental care.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't, it doesn't necessarily you don't necessarily qualify, but they came through with grants for local nonprofits to help with COVID relief.
Yeah.
That's great.
Lansing.
Not to mention the PPEs
amazing.
that we got. I mean, I remember when we got PPEs in the door that were donated. We were like,
Oh my God. We had to clear out a closet just for PPEs.
we have a whole room.
Yes,
But it
that
like
was helpful.
Everything, right?
Yeah.
The
Very much
mask,
so.
the gloves, the the hand
Everything.
sanitizer, everything. It
Masks,
was, wow.
everything.
Absolutely. I mean, the things you wouldn't think you'd get excited about, right?
We got excited.
We continue to, our main source of income has continued to be from corporations, foundations, and individual donors. For us, locally here in Michigan, the American Red Cross did not get the PPP funding. So, and we're grateful for all the donors who continue to support us with the rising needs. Yeah.
That's great. Well, I do need to put a pin in this. We could talk for hours, I'm
Definitely.
sure. But Demphna, starting with you, can you just remind everyone first and last name and maybe the organization you're with and the website or the social media or wherever they can find more information about your cause?
Hi, I'm Demphna Krikorian, Senior Director of Development for Child and Family Charities. Our website is childandfamily.org. Feel free to go and learn a little more about us.
Fantastic.
I am Carmen Turner, the CEO of Boys and Girls Club of Lansing, serving kids 7 to 17, bgclansing.org, 35,000 square foot building just for kids.
Wow. Nice.
Nadia Charara, Director of Development, American Red Cross, serving the people of Michigan here. Call us at 1-800-RED-CROSS and visit our website at redcross.org/local/Michigan.
And Rich Howard with the Davies Project, and we're all about healthy children. And you can go to our website. It's very complicated. It's www.thedaviesproject.org.
There you go. Fantastic. Thanks for all the work you're
Thank
doing.
you
I'm glad that
for
you
having
came out
us.
of this.
Chris.
It sounds, I'm
Thank
sure it was
you.
stressful, but it seems like you've come out of this better and reasonably unscathed, which I'm really grateful for. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris.